Hi church, Pastor Renier here. We live in an extraordinary time with an extraordinary opportunity to share the gospel. And therefore, join me for my mini midweek message. It is time to shine. This week I want to jump straight in and over the next couple of weeks invite you to go on a journey with me, which I call Courageous Prayers. Now, before you zoom out, over the next couple of weeks, I want us to see how important prayer is in impacting the gospel in the way we live. So I want to start with courageous prayer. How do you deal with fear? I want to take us to a message, and for many years, myself included, the well-known message of David and Goliath. Now, this is how it normally goes, right? It starts off with say, Goliath represents everything that you fear. It's the giant in your life. And normally the message you go like David and be like David, and with faith you can slay your giant, you can slay whatever fear you have. Now today, I want to actually say that there's a big gap in that particular message, and I want to show you how I've come to see that message. Normally, we would say that if you are like David and you have enough faith, you can be courageous in addressing whatever you fear in your life. And where I want to start off is to say, with courageous prayer is, what is the gap in that way, especially when we think about the gospel? Let me take you to that scene. And we find ourselves there. Israel was on the one side of the hill, the Philistines on the other side. And we have the Israelites on this side, and with the Philistines on the other side. And from the Philistines, there was a champion that came out, and his name was Goliath. He sort of represented the Philistines, or the enemy, or the giant in our terms. And what we normally do is we would say, well, look at how David went, and he had this great relationship with God. He went out and he slayed Goliath. Now we all be like that. But tonight I want to make a different statement, because I believe that because of that statement, we are inadvertently communicating is that if we are strong enough in our faith, we can slay any giant, any fear in our lives, if we just pray hard enough or do hard enough. But this is the way that I see courageous prayer. I see myself not as David. I see myself as David's older eldest brother, Eliab. I am with Israel standing there, and every morning when Goliath come out, or when my giant comes out, or what I fear comes out, and he screams these obscenities at Israel, like his eldest brother, I'm with Israel. I am standing, trembling in fear, afraid, melted in fear. What is quite ironic in this statement is that when you look at Samuel, just a couple of chapters earlier, when Samuel went to anoint the new king that was to follow up on Saul, he looked at Eliab and he saw a guy that had all the strength that he saw, or what he anticipated a king should look like. And here we have this eldest brother dreading in fear with all the fellow Israelites, including King Saul. Now the reason I say that is that, to be honest, courageous prayer is not to focus on the strengths like David. It is actually to be open about my weaknesses and be open about what I fear the most. To acknowledge that in my own strength, I'm like Eliab, I'm standing there and there's no way that I can slay my giant, or attack my fear, or conquer my fear, or if I can motivate myself hard enough. I think that is a gospel of strength that divides people. I think the downside of that is people look at us, a church and around us, and it almost feels as Christians that we all should look like David. Courageous prayer is to say, I'm like Eliab. I'm melted with fear. I'm looking at my giant and there's no way I can. But let me show you another take on who David is. David as a type of redeemer. David went in, and upon hearing what Goliath has said about Israel, David represented Jesus. You see, what is amazing about this is that while Israel was melted with fear, David, as a type of Jesus, went in, and only because of his skills and his connection and the person who he is in God, was able to slay Goliath. The amazing part of that is we then watch David in confidence attacking the enemy. What makes this incredibly unique and makes it actually the gospel so beautiful is the fact that David, when he slayed Goliath, did so to the glory of God. In the same way that Jesus went to the cross to slay the greatest fear known to man, and that is to be separated from God. There is no greater fear than that. And what is amazing is we saw once Goliath was dead on the ground, Israel responded. They got into action, and because of what they saw David done to their giant, they responded and they came storming down the hill to attack their enemy. So the good news about a courageous prayer is not that we are called to slay our giant. In fact, the gospel, the good news of the gospel is the very opposite. It is the openness about our weaknesses to say, but I'm like Israel, Eliab. But the good news is that there is a David, there is a Jesus who paid the full price, who paid, and so that I may know that my greatest fear has been paid for, and therefore in his strength, pointing towards his glory, we can move forward and we have nothing to fear. I pray for each one of us that as we engage in this space of courageous prayer, that we be more open about our weakness, so that the glory points towards the strength that is in Jesus Christ.